Hello, and we are live, joined this hour by Maru Villalpando. We're very, very excited to have you this hour. Maru is just a tremendous, tremendous organizer in Washington and all throughout the country, immigrants' rights activist. So Maru, before we get started, can you tell us about how you got started, how did you get involved in the struggle, La Lucha, etc.?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I am an immigrant from Mexico, and I've lived here in Washington State for over 20 years now. And I think what pushed me to get involved was when my daughter was very little. I realized that even though she was a U.S. citizen, because she was the daughter of Latinx undocumented immigrants, she would not be treated any better than anybody else just because she was a U.S. citizen. So I just figured I needed to do something. And also being undocumented, I didn't want to wait for others to get something for me. So I started getting involved, although I was being told all the time to always stay in the shadows, and not make any waves or anything that brings attention to you. I think I started doing the opposite of that.
Yeah, yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about what that was like beginning to organize for just beginning your journey as an organizer? Like, how did you first get started?
Well, I started in Mexico, and in Mexico it's not that hard to be an organizer because you're surviving every day, but there's also a lot of solidarity and community already built because we come from generations and generations of people that have done that ahead of us. And although it's different, of course, because there's all this terminology that I had to become familiar with, like leadership, grassroots, organizing. To me, there was none of that. It was just part of my life. And then I realized, oh, there's all this terminology and even like some quote unquote professions for organizing. It was really shocking to me. I had a lot of cultural shock. But anyway, I felt that, as any immigrant, as we arrive, you're pushed to assimilate. I tried that. It didn't work for me. And even within the context of organizing, I also tried to adapt, and it absolutely didn't work for me. I think that what I found here in the US is that there's the nonprofit industrial complex, and there's the organizing that is very Western-like. And so I just, I started realizing that I had to go back to what I learned in Mexico, and just by remaining within my own community, it allowed me to become the organizer that I am today, because I just went back to my roots and I stayed within my community, and I didn't pretend to be something else, or I didn't want to get to a profession within the nonprofit system, or I didn't want to become an executive director or any of those things. And I think that's what really helped me to get to where we're at today.
Can you tell us about La Resistencia?
Yeah, La Resistencia, the resistance. So because I did a lot of different jobs within the movement, I wanted to learn. Every time lawyers, for example, would say, no, what we need is an immigration reform bill. What I did was like, okay, let's learn how do you get a bill done. And so people think that I have a political science background or something, which I don't. I just went into it. I even became a lobbyist at some point. And it turns out that I realized how messed up the system is, at least for us, right? It works for the ones in power, but not for us at the bottom. And so I became obviously very disenchanted with that effort for comprehensive immigration reform in the late 90s, beginning of the 2000s. And I started noticing how a lot of undocumented people, mainly young undocumented people, were doing direct actions. And then at some point I started seeing other fellow undocumented immigrants my age doing civil disobedience. And I figured we needed to do something in Washington State like that, because in our state, there's this image that is very progressive, and it's a really good state for immigrants, which is not really, it's better in comparison to other states, yes, but it's not that progressive as it should. And so, the fact that we have a huge detention center here that has a capacity for 1,575 people alone, which either people didn't know or didn't want to know. So in 2014, we did a civil disobedience to stop deportations for a day right outside the detention center. And that led to a hunger strike that started on March 7, 2014, that went for 56 days. And we supported because the people that went on hunger strike called us saying, hey, you're the ones that were blocking the streets. We learned that you're the ones that are willing to do this and with us and for us. So we need you to work with us. So we jumped on it. We started organizing with them. And then we figured we needed to remain as a group. So we were really pushed by people inside to respond. And then we heard that call. We decided to continue as a group, and 6 years later, we're still together as La Resistencia.
Can you tell us about the group Latino Advocacy?
Well, Latino Advocacy is a consulting business that I set up because I'm undocumented. But I figured years ago, more than 10 years ago, actually, I figured, well, undocumented immigrants, we don't have a lot of rights, but businesses do. So I set up a business, and that's how I've been doing my work. I get contracts to sustain myself and my child, and then I do all my immigration work pro bono. So the idea of Latino was not only to sustain myself, but to create an entity that will support small grassroots efforts that don't have any support whatsoever. So I started doing a little bit of everything. I did workshops and trainings for specific areas, like, what is policy? What is public policy? How can you even implement policy within your own groups? What kind of policies are we talking about? What kind of procedures that are reflected within the racial justice and immigration justice movement that we're fighting for? How do we do communications on our own terms? Mass communications. How do we deal with mass media? Because I remember going to a meeting one time, and they were talking about communications with mass media, and they were saying, well, if you have an accent, maybe you want to give somebody else the mic. And I was like, no, no, we're going to take the mic. So I've been pushing a lot of groups to take on mass communications, regardless of our bad English. If we don't speak the perfect English, or we have a very heavy accent, doesn't matter. We need to be our voice out there. So and just I would travel everywhere people asked me to go, and I would give them the basics of how to organize in their own community based on what they asked me. And then I would connect them with other groups across the state or in other regions. And so it's just finding ways to make little grassroots efforts sustainable, and then make them grow by being connected throughout the areas.
Yeah. So what advice would you have for somebody? Like, let's say they're at a rally, they're there to support a cause, they're against the war, they're against the detention center, they're against this, they're against some banks, and someone puts a microphone in their face, and they're like, it's mass media, so it's probably hostile to whatever they're trying to say. What should they know when they're going to deliver this message?
Well, the first thing they should know is that media is going to edit what they're going to say, so they have to be really short, so they have a harder time editing what you say. And they have to say what they would like to hear. So I don't want to, when I turn on the news, I want to hear somebody saying the release of everybody in detention is to happen now, and nobody should be re-detained ever, period. So both what we need right now and what we need in the future. So not to settle to demands that are really needed as of now, but what else do we want for the future? So I think those are two main points that are very easy to remember, and that not only work for media, but really for our own organizing. We know what we don't want, but we should also know what we want instead.
Yeah. So doing all this work, and you ended up a Target a few years ago, and there's all kinds of people that rallied behind you. Can you speak a little bit to that experience?
Yeah. So when we did the first shutdown action outside the detention center, my original idea was that we would have undocumented people doing the shutdown with me, but that didn't happen. Obviously, most undocumented people didn't want to do a civil disobedience. So it turned out only 2 of us out of 10 being undocumented. But that was really not the news. It was the hunger strike. And so when the hunger strike began, I became kind of the spokesperson, because people in detention would call me. And I was really and I'm still till today one of the main people in contact with people detained. And so when I became a spokesperson, I was asked, and are you undocumented? Because media knew of the previous action. I would say, yes, I'm undocumented. And so it became this kind of, oh, wait, so people in detention are doing this, and then you're outside as undocumented talking about this and working with them. So it was like a shock for many, right? That somebody undocumented would come and say, yes, and I did a showdown action and I'm willing to be arrested if necessary. So I think that created a lot of attention to what we were trying to do. And throughout the years, we grew and grew. We started getting more and more support. A lot of groups that were not originally agreeing with us, because when we started, it was under the Obama administration. A lot of groups were saying, no, you shouldn't do this to Obama, and you should give Democrats another break, another one. So we were not popular at the beginning, but as years went by and Obama actually not only didn't stop deportations, actually deported a lot of people, but he also increased detentions and increased the machine. He even is the one that institutionalized family detention centers. So the more it got worse, the more people start paying attention to our work. So we got more and more popular, and ICE noticed that. Immigration Customs Enforcement noticed that. And at the end of 2014, I had already noticed that I was being monitored by ICE. And by 2017, late in 2017, in December 2017, I got a notice to appear in the mail, which is the first process to have somebody in deportation proceedings. And so we came out public in January of 2018 saying that ICE had targeted me because it was a clear target. They knew of me since 2014, yet they didn't decide to put me on deportation proceedings. I have never had the traditional triggers to be in deportation proceedings, so I have not been detained by ICE, in a raid. I hadn't had any criminal record or contact with police that could trigger that as well. So it was pretty obvious that it was political. And then we find out throughout the years now, because of public records requests, etc., that there are documents that prove that they really wanted to come after me because they felt that I have a lot of quote unquote clout, and they wanted to take away some of my clout. And that they've been monitoring our work for a long time. And they obviously are not happy that we're exposing their terrible ways and how they operate. And they know that we're winning. And so I bet they're afraid of us, and that's why they targeted us. But we were not the only ones, right? So in 2017, we start noticing this pattern of targeting activists throughout the nation. By the time we came public, we actually had reached out also to the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights. We actually had a hearing, and we brought other 5 members of our immigrant community that have been targeted as well. And at some point we counted over 20 people throughout the country that had been targeted by ICE because of their involvement in ending detentions or deportations, or being involved somehow in immigrant justice work.
So you mentioned that a lot of the activity began not necessarily under the Trump years, but it's continued obviously, but actually began during the presidency of Obama. And so I think for a lot of people, they see Trump as like this kind of scary guy, this horrible monster. But Biden is not exactly the rising of the sun either. I mean, it's not like it's not the end. It's not the end of the story. I mean, the Biden presidency was still probably extending the legacy of Obama, because you speak a little bit to like just how badly things increased under Obama, especially ICE.
Yeah. So Obama had in his hand a big agency already, right? The Bush administration before Obama created Immigration Customs Enforcement. They're the ones that came up with the idea of the Department of Homeland Security, and within that, the Immigration Customs Enforcement, the police of immigration. But it was really Obama, the one that expanded detention under his watch. We saw the rise of many detention centers. They were playing this game though, where they were saying, we're not going to take families, but we're going to take the quote unquote felons. So they were supposedly going after the people with criminal records, which I just want to remind everybody that immigration law is civil, and it has been used, the idea of criminality, to detain immigrants. But also, if we think about people that do have criminal records, they have already gone through the system. It's not right to trial them twice out in a system that is not the criminal system, which is what has happened. And that was the image that Obama was trying to portray, that people that have criminal records need to be in the immigration system. And it's not true. It shouldn't be true. I mean, that's why we're fighting to get everybody out. And so as he was playing this game of we're only getting the bad ones out, he was really appeasing the Republicans, supposedly to get some sort of immigration reform. Now, let's just want to say briefly, immigration reform is nothing but papers, right? You just give me a paper. The government says, you are undocumented, you don't have a paper that allows you to be here. Well, give me the paper. Yet they don't want to give me the paper. So they created this system where we are undocumented because they chose for us to have a paper. And that's way back since the 80s with Reagan, that criminalized the fact of being here trying to look for a job and then you don't have a paper that allows you to work here. And so Obama just played that game by appeasing the Republicans and trying to look good in front of us by saying, oh, we're only taking the bad ones, and created a lot of programs that increased the collaboration between ICE and local police, and also surveilled. So now what really ended up happening is that Trump inherits this huge machine with already everything in place, over 200 detention centers already built, huge collaboration between local sheriffs, local police stations, local jails with ICE. And so you also have surveillance programs that expanded with technology, such as Palantir or even Amazon, trying to sell sophisticated facial recognition software to ICE, plus already providing them with cloud services. So he didn't have to invent anything. Trump just started using what Obama gave him. And before he left, we were saying, don't you see what you're doing? Don't you see what so it is to me, it's very hypocritical from the Democrats to say, oh, look, all the terrible things Trump is doing, which they could have prevented it by undoing the machine altogether. But they decided just to leave it the way it was.
And the current director of ICE, Thomas Homan, he was actually appointed by Obama, right? And not Trump.
I'm not sure, but what I'm sure of is that ICE and all their infrastructure and the people that work there are the same people. They're just moving, up and down or switching places here and there. But they have always been with this clear mentality of we're gonna go after all these people just because they're not from here, because they're brown, they're black, and they're poor, and we're gonna get rid of them, and we're gonna make them suffer and make money on the way there. So a lot of the people that we see now within ICE making decisions have been there forever. So for example, the office field director here in Seattle, Natalie Asher, she was already field director when we started back in 2014. So her post and all her rhetoric is exactly the same as it was before. The only difference is now they have more like free reign to go and do things that they probably wouldn't have been able to do before, because in a way, Obama restrained them a bit, but now they don't have that restraining anymore.
Yeah. Wow. This is really insightful information. What should people know about the Tacoma Detention Center that they might not know right now?
Well, it's a place that was built in 2004 with the blessing of the city of Tacoma. The city of Tacoma back in the day actually passed a resolution in favor of building the detention center. And the detention center has been seen as one of probably the most talked about detention centers because of constant organizing inside. People have been resisted for a long time inside. The people detained have gone on hunger strike after hunger strike. We have documented since 2014, 22 hunger strikes that we have supported. That doesn't mean there's only been 22. Probably there's been more than that, but those are the ones we know of. And there's been a lot of work in getting people out, right? So there's been constant campaigns, individual campaigns, and there's been a lot of attention now to what the detention center is. Now, just recently we learned of 2 cases, positive cases of COVID-19. One of them, ICE is a quote unquote recovered positive, but in reality is still positive. It's a person that they actually sent to Florence. In Florence, Arizona, he was found positive. He was sent back, although he's positive and ICE knew. And just on Friday, May 15, another person we find out was brought from the Department of Corrections in Oregon to Tacoma, also being positive. And this is just plain positive. They didn't say it's recovered positive. So they're bringing positive COVID-19 people to a place that they're claiming has no COVID-19. And that tells you the level of disregard that ICE has for human life. Not only these people are sick and need medical attention, they're transported throughout the nation, around places, to another detention center to be isolated and to be detained. So, and this is supposed to be the best detention center in the country. ICE always talks about it like the best facility. Now just think about how the rest of the other 200 plus detention centers look like.
So ICE actually claims like this is the I mean that's so wild when your organization is so synonymous with human rights abuse that you would be like, oh yeah, but we have this one that's less abusive than the rest. I mean that's terrible. I mean what a horrible organization. I mean, you know, this is not news to everyone that ICE is terrible, but that's wow. Okay, so what are some tips and advice to people who you know, there's a detention center in their town, they want to organize, they want to connect to the people inside, they want to, what's the first steps? What should they do?
Well, I think there's the first step is, who are you? Are you an immigrant yourself? Are you an immigrant of color? Are you undocumented? Or are you a white person with a ton of privilege? Are you a white passing person? Are you second generation immigrant? There's no third generation, okay? There's no such a thing. I've seen people that say, I'm a third generation. No, you're from here. You're not an immigrant anymore. But I think that that's the first step, because once you realize, okay, what is my role within the community? Then you can figure out, should I go in and start supporting efforts? Should I lead efforts? What do I do? Instead of just trying to, you know, like when the zero tolerance happened last year, when families were being separated, parents were separated and put in federal custody prisons, and then children in separate detention centers, there were a lot of people that just jump on that and started like organizing actions. And yeah, that's good, but not so good, because we already have a lot of efforts of organizing in different areas. So I would say first, just identify yourself and your level of privilege. And then second, if you already believe that this is unjust, you probably know of the organizations in the area that are doing a lot of work. So you will be joining those efforts. So it depends where you're at. You'll see that there's a ton of grassroots organizing happening. And obviously, we are part of different groups. So one of them is called Detention Watch Network, and it's a national network where several of us throughout the country, we get together and we plan, we figure, because, you know, obviously we're winning, but slowly, and we need way more support. We're not going to win by ourselves for sure. So we try to come together to think about what should we be doing, what is the most effective way, where are the places where they need the most help, because there's some places that have really good organizing, but there's some places that there's nothing happening, you know, like there's some areas in Louisiana where you had this pop-up of detention centers everywhere, but very few grassroots groups available to support hunger strikes or just organizing in general. So it's a matter of also thinking where I live, is there organizing happening? How's that organizing looking like? And if there's no organizing and you don't belong to the communities that should be leading, well, just, you know, join social media. There's a ton of great social media happening right now. That's really the main tool we're utilizing due to the COVID-19. But most definitely, they talk about it, talk about it, mention it, remind people that when we talk about being safe and taking care of each other, should not exclude people that are in cages, such as detention centers or prisons or jails.
Yeah. How can people connect and support your work specifically?
We are in social media. Our handle is La Resistencia NW, and our website, laresistencianw.org. We're in Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We have a ton of calls to actions, like sometimes weekly or bi-weekly. We also have, we just put together a video with different statements from a state senator to children of people detained, to experts on human rights saying why we need to release people in detention now, not tomorrow. And so it's like even sharing those videos, I think, are very powerful, because if you watch that video, you'll hear this, it makes you cry how these little kids have to plead for the release of their father, that now they know that it's a dangerous time with COVID-19, and children shouldn't be facing, that need to plead to get their parents out. So just even sharing that would be great help.
Well, I know you're an extremely busy person. I promise to get you under 30 minutes. Thank you so much for your time. We'll drop the links below. Are there any words of wisdom that you have for us right now, just how we should be, how keep the faith, keep fighting, struggling in this pandemic?
Well, I don't have any words of wisdom. I think that what I'm good at is listening, and every time I think that things get really bad, it reminds me of the words of one of the best organizers I ever met in detention, Cipriano Rios. He was deported in 2015 and died last year in Mexico due to the lack of medical care. I remember when things were getting really bad in the first hunger strike in 2014, and other people didn't want to organize inside anymore. He said to me that people were afraid, and he was telling them, what are they going to do to us? Deport us? And he started laughing, and I was laughing too. And so since then, I always think, like, what else are they going to do to us, right? I mean, we already are under this huge oppression, and they have more to lose than us. And so I always think of those words that Cipriano shared with me. I think that's the wisdom that I would pass along, is what else are they going to do to us? They have more to lose them than us. So we have to keep fighting, because at the end, we're going to win more than the little we have right now.
Yeah, we'll win.
We will.
All right.
Thank you so much.